we go. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome aboard to the Redistricting Advisory Committee. We're excited to have you on board and certainly to get this project started. As you know, the board, our board members each selected 3 people to represent them on this committee. And there are a couple of you that are still going to get approved on Tuesday, but most everyone was approved last week, Tuesday on May 11th. So I thought that to begin this, what I can do is maybe introduce, we can introduce ourselves. I will start with our team, and then also with, and then we'll finish off with you guys. I think the easiest will be is if you can introduce yourself when your chance comes, and just tell us if you have any experience on this team, so your team members can get to know you a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see what I'm looking at. There we go. Are you able to see what I'm looking at?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so so this is your agenda for this evening, but I'm going to scroll over to this piece here so we can talk about the introductions. So I'll start with myself. I am Michelle Hepner. I am the Legislative Intergovernmental and Public Affairs Officer for the county, and I was generously selected to do this project for the county and for the board. So I will be probably your main contact as part of this process. So I will then turn it over to Bernadette Curry.
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Bernadette Curry. I'm County Counsel, and I am just here in a support role. Ryan Fitzgerald, who you will be introduced later, is taking the lead. So I'm just going to welcome everybody and say thank you for your participation. Your input is going to be quite valuable in the process.
Thank you, Bernadette. And then we have Bill Emlin. He's actually not able to make it this evening, but he is the Assistant County Administrator, and he's actually my boss, so he'll be intricately involved in our process. And then we have Tim Flanagan.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Tim Flanagan. I'm the Chief Information Officer and the Registrar of Voters for the County of Solano. So ultimately, I'll be the recipient of all of your hard work.
Okay, John Gardner.
Good evening, everybody. John Gardner. I'm the Assistant Registrar of Voters. Fortunately, I was here almost 10 years ago when we implemented the last redistricting, so I'm familiar with the time crunch that we'll be under to get everything set for the next election.
Perfect. And then Stuart, I wasn't sure if he was on the line. So Stuart Bruce is our GIS manager, and so he is responsible for the county's mapping system. So he's very important to this project. I know he said he may or may not be able to make it this evening, so I'll go ahead and introduce him. Alan Calder. Okay, Alan is our planning program manager. He's under the Department of Resource Management. So resource management has a lot to do with land use issues in the county. So he will also be integral to this process. And then we have Ryan Fitzgerald. I know, Ryan, you are on the line. Yep. He is the Deputy County Counsel, and he will actually be providing your training this evening. All right, then I'll move on to our consultants. We have 4 consultants that are working with us. That's the consulting team. And so we have Paul Mitchell, who's the owner of Redistricting Partners. Go ahead, Paul. Okay.
Hello, everyone. How are you doing?
Okay, Chris Chaffee. Is Chris on?
Chris isn't on. He's in San Jose right now. So, but we
Okay.
do have Sophia and Kimmy.
Okay, Sophia?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. We'll be helping with community outreach.
And Kimmy?
Hi, everyone. I'm Kimmy Shigatani. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer with Redistricting Partners, and I'll be your point of contact working with Michelle on this project.
Perfect, thank you. All right, so we're going to move over now to our Redistricting Advisory Committee members. So we'll start with Tiffany.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tiffany Jones. I live in Vallejo, California. Excited to be here.
Do you have any experience in doing redistricting, Tiffany?
I do. Myself and my friend Mina Diaz drew the map for the city of Vallejo this past election cycle, 2018. So yes, I have a little bit of experience doing it.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Alex, have you joined us?
In order for me to speak on there, do I have to push my thing?
All right, Alex is not on yet. And Cassandra, have you joined us yet?
Yes.
Oh,
My name is Sandra James, and I live in Vallejo as well, and I do not have experience with redistricting.
All right, thank you. Okay, so moving on to Chris.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Angle. I live in Suisun Valley. I don't have any experience with redistricting, although I did serve for 7 years on the Solano County Civil Service Commission.
Oh, great. Stephanie?
Okay, I'm Stephanie Cobb. I live in Fairfield, and I have no experience on this whatsoever.
Okay, you'd be a great member of the team. Nina?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Mina Diaz. I'm council member for Vallejo District 3. And along with Tiffany Jones and 3 other Vallejo residents, we are the people that drew the map for the redistricting in the city of Vallejo. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deborah? Deborah? You're on mute.
I'm so sorry. Deborah Russo. I live in the Green Valley area, and I have not worked on any of the mapping committees.
Okay, great. Mike?
Mike Nail. I live in Fairfield, and I have little experience.
Okay. DeLon?
Hello, I'm DeLon Jackson. I live in Fairfield and have no experience.
Okay. Steve Greenberg is the person that's not available this evening. And then there's also a vacancy in District 4. And then we have Sean for District 4.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sean Smith. I live in Cordelia, and I have experience on commissions, but nothing on redistricting specifically.
Okay, perfect. District 5, Jim.
Yeah, hi. Good evening. I'm Jim McCulley. I have no experience in this process at all.
Great. Lisa?
Hi, I am Lisa Donahue. I live in Fairfield. I have no experience in redistricting, but I'm a former Community Resource Commissioner and Planning Commissioner for the City of Fairfield.
Okay, great. And then Rosie.
Hi, my name is Rosie Enriquez. I do not have any experience in this field. I was on the board of directors for the Solano County Fair under Skip Thompson.
Okay, got it. Perfect. Well, thank you. So what I think we'll do now is we'll talk a little bit about redistricting. I'll ask our consultant, Paul, just to give you a really, really brief overview of what redistricting is, so you know what you're in for. And then from there, we'll talk about some of your tasks and your roles as in this process. So Paul, are you ready to go?
Yep, I am. I'm just going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint real quick. So it's going to turn off yours and come onto mine. Okay. So you can let me know when that happens. Did that work?
I'm not seeing it.
I'll do it again then. Let me try
I
again.
see it.
Oh, if others see it, that's fine.
Okay, well, I'm just going to start. I'll do it again, so hopefully everybody can see it this time.
Okay.
How did that work?
That works fine.
Alrighty, great. So again, Paul Mitchell with Redistricting Partners. I'm the owner of a company that is doing a lot of redistricting around the state. We have experts in the fields of community outreach, Sophia Garcia, who you've met, also people who have worked intensely with data and GIS and mapping tools, and Kimmy Shigatani, who's here, who has been working with agencies that are doing redistricting. So she's worked with dozens of agencies that are actually in the redistricting process. So I'm going to go through a few slides just to kind of like gently get us started in the process and talk about what we'll be doing. So like I said, we have a team that's going to be working with you and with your staff to help bring you up to speed with the redistricting process. If you said that you don't have redistricting experience, that makes you pretty normal. It's very rare to find people that have experience in this field, but a lot of what is really critical in the process is kind of more normal skills, like being able to listen to the community and understand your neighbors and work as a team. So the process that we do is we will work with you on supporting a open, fair, transparent redistricting process. The county has decided to have a process that takes the redistricting and puts it more in a public space with members of the public engaging and doing the work rather than having this be a backroom process. And that's really great. We're going to be providing you with training and tools to do this. We're going to be working with you and your county staff on the public engagement and transparency, and then helping on any public outreach engagement work. The trainings that we do will cover a number of things that you're going to want to kind of get familiar with in the redistricting process. And since a lot of the work is kind of arcane, you might find that multiple people are kind of covering the same thing a little bit. So you'll hear things like definitions of communities of interest, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 times. But as you hear these things more often, as you familiarize yourself, you'll start to feel a lot more ready to actually do the districting process. So one of the first presentations we'll do, one of the first trainings is about the role of being a commissioner. And for that, we'll bring in former redistricting commissioners from state and local government. The Federal Voting Rights Act. There is a California Voting Rights Act, but that only deals with agencies that have at-large elections that need to go to districts. Once something's in districts, it's the Federal Voting Rights Act that comes into play. Learning about communities of interest and what those are. Going over some of the fundamental aspects of redistricting, like a Redistricting 101, and then going into online tools for drawing maps and the software that's used to kind of bring up your ability to understand the technical aspects of the redistricting process. The online mapping tools are going to be provided by the county and accessible through the county website for any member of the public to go on and draw their community of interest and submit that to say, this is my community, please keep our area whole, or whatever it is they want to say. And also either now or at a future date when the data is in for the full 2020 census, they'll be using that tool to draw draft plans. Being a commission and seeing the draft plans from the public before we actually engage in a process of drawing lines is really valuable for you to kind of get a sense of what community members would like to see in draft plans. We're going to work with you to facilitate outreach hearings throughout the county. There will be hearings in each of the 5 current supervisorial districts over the summer. And the idea with these hearings is to allow the members of the community to come forward and talk about what they want to preserve in the redistricting process, what their community is, and how they want to see you go about the process of drawing lines. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I'll go ahead and close my screen, but there's going to be a lot of training and a lot of conversation about each of these topics as we go through the process. And I'll be here, or other members of the Redistricting Partner staff will be here to help out at every step along the way.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Paul. Okay, so does anyone have any questions for Paul? Okay, there'll be ample time to ask questions as we get deeper into the process. Okay, so so as you heard from Paul, this redistricting process is sort of a two-step process. Initially, we're doing the outreach piece, and then the mapping piece comes later once the US 2020 census data has been released. And so that brings us to the meeting schedule. I'm going to share my screen again with you so you can see what I'm looking at. So initially, you saw that we would that you'd be meeting every, oops, wrong one. Yep, that's the wrong thing. Let me try and fix that. Sorry, just trying to find the right screen here. Okay. All right, I'm hoping you can see that now. So initially we talked about having you meet every first and third Thursday of the month. I think you're going to need that amount of meetings in order to get yourselves organized and to get situated and start working towards the report that the board is hoping you can present to them in late September. So, but in between all of that, we'll also be doing outreach meetings. And I'm going to bring up our schedule for outreach meetings right over here. I'm hoping you can all see that. Okay, so so these are your community outreach meetings. There will be 10 meetings. The board chose to have 2 meetings in each district. So the way we've scheduled it is we've done one evening meeting for each district, and then one weekend meeting, a Saturday, for each district. We chose to do them in sequential order, and so each meeting will be 5 weeks apart for each district. And so that would give people opportunities to be able to participate as, you know, as their schedule fits. Also, in addition to that, I wanted to show you the actual schedule when you put this together. This is sort of the bird's eye view of what the schedule looks like. You can see it's very busy. It's very fast paced. So the yellow squares that you're seeing there on this calendar are the meetings, or your committee meetings. The red blocks that you're seeing are our touch points with the Board of Supervisors. And then the pink ones are the meetings that will be the outreach meetings with the community. That's where you will be getting input from the community. So you can see these meetings go all the way until the end of August, and that'll leave you with 3 meetings in September to get yourselves organized and put your report together, and then I'll help you package it so that we can be in front of the board on September 28th to present the findings to the board. Does anyone have any questions relative to that?
This is Tiffany. I actually have a question. So you're going to give us the template to be able to put the packet together for the board, or that's something that we have to create on our own?
Yes. So so we have a template for the board report, but that will be more of a transmittal report. You will have a standalone report that you will put together, and I will certainly help you with that. That you will that'll be the attachment to the board report, and that will be the findings from all the different outreach meetings that you do. I was going to suggest that we can talk at some point about your meetings. In fact, I have it written down here to talk about some of your roles here and how we can get organized so that everyone is participating and everyone has is because we recognize that not everyone's going to be able to make every single meeting, but I would suggest that you definitely want to make the meetings where your district is doing the outreach for for purposes of knowing what's going on in the entire process. It would be helpful to go to every meeting. If by chance we end up doing virtual meetings, most of this, depending on where we are with the COVID in Solano County, we're not sure at this point when in-person meetings will resume. But if they are virtual, we'll be recording most of the meetings, so it'll be something that you'd be able to go back to and review if you start feeling like you're lost in the process. But I would suggest at least we'll organize. We'll talk about roles in a minute, and we'll get you organized so that you you have a good team and everyone's participating in that. Okay, so let's talk about roles right now. So as I said, I think it would be important for you to participate in at least your district or your the district that's beside the district that you're representing, at least so that you can see where those lines are going to be drawn over time. And then, as Paul had mentioned to you, training will be provided. They'll help you develop an outreach plan. They'll help you understand how to conduct these outreach meetings. So this will be your next meeting on June 3rd. You'll receive that training. And then I think one important aspect is, given that the various districts are so different, if you think we go from one side of the county as a Bay Area county to a valley, type of county, very agricultural, I think it would be helpful for us if you could help us identify where we can do some of the how we can get the word out to some of the community members. We recognize not everyone is computer savvy and will be able to do this virtually. So we want to be able to put out information, whether it's paper maps or other ways for people to be involved in the process. So that would be one thing I'd definitely be looking to you guys for. Is it community centers that we go to? Is it schools where we post stuff? In your specific districts would be really helpful for us and our team of how to reach out to the community. Which also brings me to the website. Today we launched the redistricting website, and I will send you we have a press release that will be going out early tomorrow morning, but I will also be sending you information on that specific website. And that's also a place that you can direct your community members to get information, and also there's an opportunity for them to provide input on that website. And then I would also suggest that as part of getting organized that, so there are 3 of you from each district. Perhaps you talk among yourselves and figure out who can be the lead person for each district. So we have like 5 main or lead people for this project. I would also see that particular person being involved in the presentation that will go in front of the board on September 28th when you present your findings to the board. So, and over the next week or so, we can talk about, getting organized and who would like to take the lead in the various districts. And then ultimately, I think we need to also consider looking at having a lead person overall that can help facilitate these meetings and also help coordinate, between ourselves and, our team, the county team, and then the Redistricting Advisory Committee. So with that, one of the things I have done is I've created a distribution list for you. So you can see it says RAC21@solanocounty.com. If you want to communicate with your entire Redistricting Advisory Committee, you send an email to that email address, and every one of you 15 will get the email. As a full disclosure, I'm also on that email address, so I can help you if you're lost, or if you just need information, I can respond to it. But the next email address that you see there, it's redistricting@solanocounty.com. That's actually a mailbox that I will manage. So if you have community members that have questions you cannot answer, or people are just looking for ways to get involved, this is an email address that they can use. And I will send all this information out to you tomorrow. But this will be an email address that they can use, and that email box will get monitored, and I will respond as needed, or forward emails to you as the Redistricting Advisory Committee as needed if it pertains more to what you are doing. And then, of course, there's the redistricting website, which we launched today. You can type that into your browser, and you would be able to see the redistricting website and what we've launched so far. In fact, I put a little screenshot up here. This is what the homepage, this is your landing page. This is what it looks like so far. You have your own section on this website. You are already listed there as committee members. And if people want to communicate with you, there's a way for them to submit comments and stuff, and it comes straight to your RAC21@solanocounty.com email address. So there are a myriad of ways for the community to communicate with you and with us as well as a team. So with that, I just wanted to give you that overview, and then I think we have about an hour and a half left. I'm not sure how much time Ryan's going to need, but I wanted to, if there's no questions, I wanted to turn you over to Ryan to give you some of the legal training that we are required to provide for you. So any questions before I turn you over to Ryan? All right, hearing none. Ryan?
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Great. All right, so I'm gonna make you rest easy here. I'm not gonna take an hour and a half to talk about the Brown Act. I have maybe about a half hour, but I'll try to go kind of quickly. It's a dense area of law. So if you have questions, you're obviously welcome to reach out to me. During the meeting, after the meeting, we'll be here as a resource for you. I'm the deputy assigned to help this group. So throughout this process, if you have questions about the Brown Act, please feel free to reach out. So I do have a presentation, so I'm going to try to share that real quick. Okay. Is that showing up for you guys?
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am, like I said, I'm Ryan Fitzgerald. I'm the deputy in the county. I'm a deputy in the county council's office. Our job is to provide legal advice to the board of supervisors and county departments, and this advisory committee as well. So this evening, we're going to be starting with a brief elections code definition of your role, including the board of supervisors' role in selecting you and directing your work. Then the bulk of today, we're going to spend with the Brown Act requirements for conducting transparent meetings. So the next meeting, you'll hear all about the substance of what your group has been assembled to do. I think it was previewed a little bit by Paul and Michelle. So we'll be hearing about the Fair Maps Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, and other important legal implications for redistricting. So be sure to come for the next session, because that's really the most interesting stuff. So today, it's the rules for conducting meetings. So not as exciting. And I know that some of you, when you were introducing yourself, said that you had board or commission experience, and you'll know this already. But this, even though it's not exciting, it's going to be critically important about what our expectations are for transparency in this process. So the election code provides a definition of an advisory redistricting commission. That's an advisory, it's a body that recommends to a legislative body placement of the district boundaries for that legislative body. So in this case, you are that advisory redistricting commission, and the body in question here is our board of supervisors. So you're here to establish boundaries for supervisorial districts in Solano County. The election code provides that members of this commission must be residents of the local jurisdiction, and they must not be elected officials or family members, staff members, or paid campaign staff of elected officials in the county. So if anybody is concerned about whether they meet those definitions, please get in touch with me so that we can work that out as soon as possible. But presumably, if you are appointed, then you're qualified. So the Board of Supervisors decided to create this committee in a resolution that they passed on March 9th. And then on March 11th, they passed another resolution appointing each of you to the committee. And at that meeting, they also approved a work plan that called for each of you to receive training on the Brown Act and learn about how to conduct transparent meetings. And that about does it for the baseline. And I know that I'm rushing a little bit to see if I can squeeze everything into a half hour. But unless there's any questions, I'm going to jump right into our Brown Act discussion. Okay. So the Brown Act is the legislation we have here in California that provides for transparency in public commissions, boards, councils, and other public agencies that conduct meetings. So how did we get the Brown Act? There was a series of reports published in the Chronicle in 1952 that showed that even though local agencies conducted meetings in public, because that was the law, it was common for there to be secret side meetings where the decisions were actually made. So it was kind of a performative series of public meetings. After people read this 10-part report in the Chronicle, there was a groundswell of there was a push for strengthened open meetings laws. And in the following year, an assembly member named Ralph Brown introduced the legislation that was signed into law by the governor. And it's grown and changed a little bit over time. Notably, in 2004, the voters adopted Prop 59, which added that the public not only had a right to meetings, but they also had a right to the information and documents that were used in those meetings. So you'll sometimes hear the Brown Act referred to as a sunshine law. That's another term for this type of law. And the purpose is to ensure that deliberations and actions of local government agencies aren't conducted in the shadows, that we open the blinds and make sure that everything's being done in the view of the public. And it's designed to give the public meaningful access to their government. It ensures that the public is notified about where and when meetings will be held and what topics the local government agency will be considering. It also ensures that all documents that the government agency is relying on in that meeting are available to the public. And you can find the full text of the Brown Act in the government code at the section cited there on the slide. So this statement in the government code is really the heart of the Brown Act. All meetings of the legislative body of a local agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the legislative body of a local agency. So we know that the Brown Act applies to meetings and information used by local agencies at those meetings. So that begs the question, what constitutes a meeting? The government code provides this definition: a congregation of a majority of members at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the legislative body. So for our purpose, the committee will be participating in two types of meetings: the redistricting advisory committee meetings and the community outreach meetings. And it's important to note that you don't have to be voting on something or taking a definitive action for something to constitute a meeting. If you have a briefing or a discussion, that can be a meeting as well. So you don't have to be voting to adopt a resolution or issuing an order at the session for it to count as a meeting. But when does the Brown Act not apply? You can have individual contacts and conversations. You're allowed to talk to your fellow committee members, and you're allowed to talk to members of the public about the matters that are within the jurisdiction of the committee. But there are situations where the communication between individuals or small groups does become a problem. So we're going to talk about that, talk about serial meetings in just a minute, in 2 slides from now. They're one of the more common, or one of the more prominent exceptions to the Brown Act application is when you have a conference that's open to the public. So it probably won't apply here, but let's say that somebody decides to form and host a conference for the redistricting advisory committees of California. A majority of you decide that you can't get enough redistricting activities and you decide that you want to go. And that's great. You can go, but you can't discuss Solano Redistricting Advisory Committee business at that conference unless it's part of the conference's scheduled program and open to the public. So probably won't apply, but it's part of the Brown Act. Similarly, if we have an open and publicized community meeting, say we have a local service group and they're really excited about redistricting, they want to host their own 2021 redistricting meeting to inform their members and the public about how they can get involved with redistricting, and a majority of you want to go to that meeting, that's fine, but you can't discuss Solano Redistricting Advisory Committee business unless it's part of the scheduled program. This one might actually come up, meetings of other legislative bodies. Majority of you, if you want to go to a Board of Supervisors meeting, those are already open and publicized meetings, so you don't need to go through the hoops in the process of going through your own Brown Act agenda and notice just to participate in the Brown Act meeting. So if a group of you, more than half of you decide to go to a Board of Supervisors meeting, then no additional action is required on your part. That's not that Brown Act won't apply. Social and ceremonial events. So we're all getting along so well after this meeting that I invite you to my cat's birthday party this weekend. You could all come. I can understand why you might not want to, but if you did come, and a majority of you were there, we couldn't talk about committee business. We'd have to talk about other things that we're all interested in. So moving right along, let's give people the benefit of the doubt and talk about ways that folks sometimes accidentally have meetings. So I touched on this briefly a couple slides ago as an exception for when it's okay to have individual contacts or meetings between, or I shouldn't say meetings, but conversations between a couple people from the committee or a small group from the committee. Generally that's okay, but we run into trouble when those conversations become, quote, serial. So what that means is if it's a series of contacts that don't meet the definition of a majority, well, we see this in 2 different situations mostly. So if you can kind of visualize a wheel that has a hub and spokes leading out of it, we have, say, a committee member in the middle, that center spoke, and that committee member has an idea for something she wants to make sure is included in the report that goes to the Board of Supervisors. She goes and has one-on-one meetings with all of the other committee members until a majority agree with her. That wasn't a noticed public meeting, and it's a violation of the Brown Act. The other way that this commonly comes up is a daisy chain. They have these kind of fun, folksy terms for them, but in that situation, you have member A that has this idea, brings it to member B, member B brings it to member C, C to D, and so forth, until the members come to an agreement outside of a noticed public meeting. And that's that can be a problem with the Brown Act. And this doesn't just apply to in-person communication. It would be the same if that hub and spoke or daisy chain was via email or even via social media. So relevant to what we're doing today, collective briefings can also constitute meetings. So if you have a briefing or a workshop for your committee, like we're doing right now, and it isn't noticed, that's a problem. So fortunately, Michelle posted the agenda and made sure that this was available to the public, so we're not having a problem with the Brown Act. But you can imagine a situation where before a board has a meeting, they want to have staff brief them on what's going to happen in the meeting. And that runs into Brown Act problems if a majority is collected. And unfortunately, I don't think, Michelle could confirm, I don't think we have any retreats planned for you. But if we did, they would also be subject to the Brown Act. I think probably the most common place where people accidentally have meetings is before or after officially scheduled meetings. So everyone's really punctual. They get there on time. A majority of the members are there, and they're just really excited to get going and start talking about committee business, and they do it before the meeting starts, or after the meeting's adjourned, a majority hang back and continue to talk about agency business after the public has left. Those are common examples of violations and are contrary to the interests of transparency in our process, so are to be avoided. So a new law about the Brown Act and social media went into effect at the start of the year. A committee member can use social media to communicate with the public. So say you want to do a viral TikTok informing the public about redistricting, or you want to conduct an Instagram poll, that's totally fine. The key is that your focus is on communicating with the public. However, on the other side of that coin, it's not okay to use social media to build consensus around your idea for the Board of Supervisors report with your other committee members. So say one of you tweets your idea and the other members start hearting it or favoriting it, you're reaching an agreement outside of a notice public meeting, and that's contrary to our interest in having this be a transparent process, so that's not okay. The distinction is really the audience. If you're using social media to communicate with the public, that's great. If you're using social media as a forum to communicate about agency business with other members, that's a Brown Act problem. So let's talk about requirements for meetings. Every meeting needs to have an agenda, and everything that the committee plans to address at its meeting needs to be placed on that agenda and published in advance. The meeting needs to be open and public. That means that at your meeting, you can't have secret ballots. All people must be permitted to attend, and except in special circumstances that won't apply to our group here, no closed sessions are going to be allowed absent those special circumstances. So you can't put conditions on attendance. This means that you can't charge people to attend. So be careful about selecting a location with paid parking. People also can't be required to sign in. The Brown Act protects the public's right to attend, observe, and participate in meetings, and their participation can't be conditioned on filling out a sign-in sheet or questionnaire. So if you do have a sign-in sheet because you want to stay in touch with people, it needs to be clear on that sign-in sheet that signing in is voluntary. Meetings also need to be accessible, so don't hold a meeting somewhere that refuses access to certain members of the public. So not at a men's only club, can't hold meetings in a facility that prohibits attendance on discriminatory bases. So you want to make sure that you're picking something, picking a venue that's ADA compliant with wheelchair access. If a member of the public or the media wants to live stream the meeting, document it, photograph it, etc., they can. If it does become disruptive, they can be asked to leave, but the general rule is that people are welcome and even encouraged to shed light onto the process. So that is consistent with them taking video, audio, and rebroadcasting. If it does become disruptive, like say they have, one of those old timey, news flashbulb things going off, we could remove them at that point. But for the most part, they're on the side of allowing all of that. Now, the elections code actually has its own requirement where there's a redistricting workshop. So live translation services, this isn't part of the Brown Act, part of the elections code. Live translation services do need to be provided if they're requested within 72 hours of the meeting. So we'll keep an eye out for any requests for live translation services. That's something that we may need to accommodate if it comes in. All right, so the first requirement of meetings was that they have an agenda. and they need to be posted in a location that's freely accessible to members of the public 24/7. Most county boards and committees use the bulletin board out front of the county admin building on Texas Street in Fairfield. And if a committee has a website, it also needs to be posted there. Community outreach meetings can function as redistricting workshops, and therefore they also need to be published at least 5 days in advance because of the election code. The Brown Act requirement is only 3 days, but since we're dealing with redistricting here, our requirement is going to be a 5-day notice for our agendas. The agendas all need to say where and how the public can participate. So everything needs to be described with enough detail for people to know not only where and how the meeting is, but it needs to have enough information for them to decide whether or not they want to come at all. So for an example, an agenda that simply says, we're going to discuss big changes, that's not enough for people to know if they want to come. But if you had an agenda that said, discuss the proposed supervisorial maps to be included in the committee's report to the Board of Supervisors, that'd be perfect. The public can look at that and decide if it's something that they want to go to on a weekday evening or on a Saturday morning. And a unique aspect of redistricting agendas that doesn't apply to all Brown Act meetings is that the agendas for our meetings are going to be preserved for 10 years on the county redistricting webpage. All right, so let's talk about the public's right at our meetings. The public has the right to address the committee about anything that's on the agenda. And the good news is that that's really consistent with what the community outreach meetings are for. We're there to encourage people to talk about their communities of interest and learn more about redistricting. So that's perfect. They're also allowed to introduce other matters within the committee's jurisdiction. And I was struggling to think of an example here, but let's say that there's something that a member of the public brings up that's consistent with your role of preparing a recommendation for redistricting to the board, but it's not something that should be part of the community outreach meeting. You can respond briefly, but because of the agenda rules that we talked about, you're not allowed to have a discussion on an item that's not on the agenda. The best way to respond to that is to touch on it briefly and say that you'll be adding it to the agenda for our next redistricting advisory committee meeting, which will be open to the public as well. And then we can talk about their issue or their question at the next RAC21 meeting. And it's also good to set time limits for speakers at the start of the meeting and to be consistent. It'd be really inappropriate to cut somebody off who's critical of our process, but allow somebody who's complimentary to just keep telling us how great we are. So if you set a time at the beginning, that's the best way to do it. Often it's about 3 minutes, but you can gauge the size of your crowd and set a limit at the start of your meeting. But there is one note on that I'd like to make. If you do set a time limit and you have participants that need to take advantage of translation services, anybody using those translation services needs to be allocated twice the amount of time so that they can take advantage of their interpreter. It sounds like very reasonable policy, and it was added to the government code back in 2016. All right, so any materials that are circulated to committee members during the meeting also need to be made available to the public. That includes agendas, meetings, briefs. If a document is circulated to committee members shortly before a meeting starts, they need to be made available to the public at the same time as well. And we would accomplish this by posting any meeting materials to the website, or if somebody requests us to mail it to them, we would certainly do that as well. The Brown Act would require that. Certain documents are exempt, and most of these aren't going to apply to us, but let's say somebody circulates a draft agenda before the final gets posted to say, hey, is there anything you want to add to this? And then we go ahead and post a final version of the agenda, and it's posted in time and all that. That draft doesn't need to be disseminated to the public. And these other documents are really not going to be applicable for our purposes. They come up more in those kind of closed meeting contexts if we needed to discuss litigation or something like that. So if the website with our agenda has a blip or a crash during the required time leading up to a meeting, so it's not posted for 5 days continuously before our meeting, does that mean that we have to cancel the meeting? Generally, no, so long as we're making efforts to notify the interested parties and correct the issue and to get the agenda posted as soon as possible. So the Brown Act does give us a little bit of grace in that sense, where if it's a small blip that isn't going to affect, or hopefully wouldn't be an impediment to people's ability to learn about the meeting, then we're going to be okay, so long as we're being diligent about correcting it and doing outreach. As a general rule, meetings need to be held in the area where the committee has jurisdiction. And since we're planning to conduct the community outreach meetings in the 5 current supervisorial districts, if possible, we're totally fine on that front for our in-person meetings. For teleconference meetings like this, the location rules are a little bit shaken up right now because of COVID. So let me show you what our regular teleconferencing rules are. You'll notice there's a requirement that a majority of people teleconferencing need to be in a location within the jurisdiction. But many of these rules have been superseded by an executive order or a couple executive orders during COVID. But if you look at this, to an extent, Zoom meetings would have always been okay even before COVID, so long as people would be willing to subject themselves to all these onerous rules. If you wanted to participate in a teleconference from your house, your home address would need to be posted on the agenda, you need to post the meeting agenda at your house, and you need to allow the public to also participate from your house. So nobody was really signing up for that. And technically, I think it would even apply if you wanted to participate in a meeting from your hospital bed. You'd need to put your hospital address on the agenda, put it on your hospital room door, and let anybody wander in to be in compliance with the Brown Act. So once COVID hit and the state decided social distancing was important, the governor waived certain teleconferencing rules. This lets people participate in meetings from their homes without having their homes open to the public. That would have been counterproductive from a social distancing standpoint. It also lets people participate from outside the jurisdiction. So for all I know, you're all calling from your condos in Hawaii, and that's great because of this executive order. That's okay. However, the executive order didn't undo all of the teleconferencing requirements. Notably, all notice requirements do remain in place. Votes need to be by roll call. So that means that you can't just say, all those in favor say aye. You need to go and touch on every individual member and have them say aye, nay, or abstain. And it also still needs to be conducted in a manner that protects statutory and constitutional rights. Now, that order was superseded in part a couple days later. And the governor issued an executive order that removed the requirement that meetings have an available physical location, so long as the public could participate electronically as well. And it also required a process for swiftly responding to a reasonable accommodation request to ensure that everybody has access to the meetings. And waiving the teleconferencing rules doesn't mean a meeting can't be held in person. A meeting can still be held in person from a Brown Act perspective. There are other health concerns and local health orders that may impact that, but from a Brown Act perspective, a meeting still can technically be an in-person meeting. It's just that the teleconferencing rules have been made a lot more flexible. So a question that I've had from a number of people is, how long do these changes last? I think for the most part, they're fairly popular. I think sometimes people, members of the public, feel like they have a little bit more access to the boards and the commissions because they can just call in or Zoom in. I think some of the supervisors and some of the committee members also like the flexibility, but it's unclear how long these are going to last. They're only designed to stay in place as long as mandated or recommended social distancing measures are in effect. And that means they could go away this summer. The state legislature is considering several bills that would make changes to the Brown Act permanent. some focused on making sure the public has the right or the ability to tune in and participate remotely. Some are more geared towards the committee members themselves and their access. Some are a little bit of both. But right now it's unclear what's going to happen. And there's a possibility that by the end of this process, our meetings would go back to having those burdensome teleconferencing options that nobody really wants to take advantage of. It seems unlikely at this point. Between now and the end of the year, it's probably not going to happen, but we'll certainly be letting you know if any of our meeting rules do change. And I know that I was going quite quickly there, and there's a lot of material there. So I'm happy to entertain any questions, or if you need a second to digest and want to come back to this another time with me directly, that's great too. All right, do I still have people?
So are there any questions for Ryan? Do you know that we will take we will put Ryan's PowerPoint on your website for you, so you have it for reference purposes. Any items that we display in our meetings, we will add to your website meetings during this process. And I think someone wanted to say something. Did someone have a question?
Yes, this is Chris Angle. I did. I was going to ask if that was going to be made available.
Absolutely. Everything that is going to be made available to you will be posted and be made available to the public as well.
Yeah, I'll send that to you, Michelle, the post.
Okay, thank you. All right, so any other questions relative to what we discussed this evening? Is there anything I can help with? I will send out an email to everyone tomorrow so we can talk about how we can best get organized and how we can best get started. There's a lot of things we can do on the front end so that getting to the report later won't be as tedious. And I'm happy to work with you. I'm here to staff your committee, and I will be available to you for any questions. So you're not alone in the process, and we're happy to help you get to this next step. So with that, I don't have anything additional to put out unless there are any items from yourself or anyone from the public, which I don't see anyone actually. There's no public other than I see Stephen Hallett. Did you have anything, Stephen?
I did not, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so with that, this is the end of your first meeting. We will meet again on June 3rd. That's when you will get some very in-depth redistricting training from our consultants. Also, hopefully by then we are organized and we have some lead members to take on this task, but I'll be working with you on that in the next few days. Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a good evening and look out for the email tomorrow. Oh, I will also be sending you out calendar invites for all your upcoming meetings. So you'll have your dial-in information available. There will be a phone number available in case you prefer to do phone calls. But it seems like this was a reasonably easier process to use for most of you. So for now, we will be doing it with on Teams. And then if anything changes in the county, we'll let you know, and then we'll have to figure out a in-person meeting opportunity. Did you have any last items, Paul?
No, thank you very much for having us. And I did want to comment that Ryan's presentation was excellent. I think our staff was texting back and forth about how it was the best Brown Act presentation they'd heard. So
that's great, guys. Thank you.
Glad to hear that. All right, everyone, have a great evening, and we will be in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks for your.
Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle.